Hello and welcome to the Integrity Sports Podcast. As always, powered by Harper's Tree and Stump Removal. If you have any tree trimming, tree removal, or stump removal needs, our friends at Harper's Tree and Stump Removal have you covered. They can haul rock and sand, they can do driveway work, and now can do horizontal grinding of large wood debris piles. Give Keith a call at 229-314-2048. or at 229-938-2412. Harper's Tree and Stump Removal is proud to be the premier sponsor of the Integrity Sports Podcast.
Welcome to the Integrity Sports Podcast, covering local sports in the Southwest Georgia area, creating content that is factual, positive, and informative, promoting efforts by athletes, coaches, and sports administrators. Now, here's your host, Tim Estes.
Hello, and thank you for making the Integrity Sports Podcast a part of your weekly routine. If you're watching today on YouTube, let me encourage you to hit the subscribe button. If you're watching on Facebook, make sure and hit the like and share buttons, and let's get our viewership up. Our guest today has been a friend of mine for well over 30 years. Daryl Dait, who is a weekly co-host on the podcast Locked On Auburn and is now doing some work with the Auburn Network. Daryl, thanks for joining me.
Man, it's just great to be here. Very proud and happy to be on your program. Glad we can finally make it happen. This has taken off, and I feel honored and privileged to be here. The fact that we've known each other over 30 years means we shared a hospital room and were born together in the same room, right? Because we're just 31, 32 years old. So right out of the womb, man, we knew each other.
You got it. Hey, Daryl, this is going to be a lot of fun. You and I go way back, and I want to give our viewers a little bit of that background. We both showed up in Montgomery, Alabama, I think, to play baseball. You over at Auburn, Montgomery, me at Faulkner. You worked with my wife, Tammy, at Olympia Sporting Goods there in Montgomery, and that's really kind of how you and I met. For several years, we went to church together. You became one of my PA announcers over at Crampton Bowl in Patterson Field when I was the stadium manager there. And Daryl, honestly, from the first time I heard you on the mic, I thought, boy, there's something special there. Now you're the president of a local company there in Montgomery, and you've always kind of had this side gig in media, and that really seems to be taking off now with what you're doing with Locked On Auburn and the Auburn Network.
Yeah, I'm glad I have this opportunity after all these years to kind of set the record straight and publicly acknowledge that back in 1992, and I always had a love for sports announcing. I mean, I think my parents wanted to get me checked out by a psychologist at a young age because I would turn the television down when I was watching games and do the play-by-play myself. And they probably thought I was talking to myself. I've always had that love to do that. And quite honestly, thank you, because you were the first person back in 1992 to believe in me and offer me an opportunity to get behind the mic at Patterson Field. And man, I thought I was at Dodger Stadium. You know, that's how much I loved it. And same with Crampton Bowl, doing the football games. So that you gave me that opportunity, my first shot. I've always remembered that all through the years and all the broadcasting gigs I've done. It all started with you asking me and giving me a chance to do that. So I am indebted and forever grateful for that.
Daryl, I want to kind of put a bow on the Auburn football season. You've spent one season now really covering Auburn football closely, and I want to get your thoughts as they move into the off season. First off, let's talk a little bit about year one under Hugh Freeze. What are the good things? What needs to improve? Give me your thoughts on that as we go into this off season.
Sure. I think it's like a two-part play. In my opinion, the opening act was really good. What he was able to do off the field and salvage such a great recruiting class last year, getting in the top 20, had a nice portal class in January. I think the one in the spring struggled a little bit with on the field performance, but all that added up. And we kept saying proof of concept. This has got to translate to the field. And that's where I think it was a mixed bag. I think at some point during the season, there were some games and some things that happened that you could see a lot of hope, a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of excitement. And then there were some really, I think, dark times. And so it was, a lot of that, when you go 6-6 before the bowl game, that's what you get. It's a mixed bag. But I think the concern I have, and I think the thing that's going to have to get corrected before next year is because, again, with this off the field stuff, you look at this recruiting class, which is going to finish top 10, maybe top 6. I think that Hugh Freeze has got to be more decisive. And I think there's a formula and a blueprint that works, and that's when he calls plays. Auburn has had a lot of success in games that he's had the play sheet over his mouth on the sidelines. The Alabama game, the winning streak that Auburn went on there in the middle of the season. When he's on the sidelines with his arms folded and really and he's not calling plays, Auburn struggles. So to me, it's a simple fix. I don't understand why it's getting made to be so difficult. They're successful when he calls plays. They're not when he doesn't. I get that he's got to recruit and he's got a lot of different things going on, but welcome to college football in this day and age. A lot of coaches have to juggle and multitask. Auburn, he needs to call plays next year, and Auburn needs to get an offensive coordinator that is very heavy-handedly recruited and is known on the recruiting trail, and let Freeze call plays and game plan, because I think they struggled when he didn't. And why go away from it, Tim, if it works? That's what was puzzling to me.
Yeah, and Daryl, I think it was a perception thing. He's a head coach at a major university once again. And typically that head coach wants to be more of a manager. But we saw the success, like you said, when he actually called the plays. You're going to have to throw the perception out the window and do what works.
Especially that there are certain coaches in their DNA. What makes you successful and what brought you to the dance is what you need to stick with. Hugh Freeze isn't a successful head coach because he's a CEO type coach. He got hired at Ole Miss and at Liberty and had success there because he's a really good play caller and a really good game plan manager on game day. So if you're an offensive guru and that's your strength, don't go away from it. I mean, Tommy Tuberville was a guy that I remembered was a CEO type. If he got a really good offensive coordinator and a really good defensive coordinator, he wasn't a very strong recruiter, but he had some good recruiting classes because he could allocate. He was a CEO. He put people in positions to succeed. And when they didn't, like Tony Franklin, he was decisive. I think Hugh Freeze needs to be that way. And I think the Auburn, that mythology that Auburn's got of all these big money guys, with their hands in things, if he's decisive and he says, I want to call plays, that's my bread and butter, they'll let him call plays and they'll give him what he wants and what he needs to do. But I think that needs to be task number one next year is every game, none of this roller coaster back and forth stuff, let him call the plays. Because you're right, it is a bigger job. It's a CEO type. You got to really be able to allocate and let people do their jobs and not micromanage. But heck, if you have to get involved and micromanage to be successful, by God, you better do it.
And Daryl, now we've seen what the high school recruiting has been, and you got guys like Cam Coleman and Perry Thompson coming in. Hank Brown, really impressive in his few snaps he got in the bowl game. We've got Walker White coming in, another really heralded quarterback. So the future looks bright as far as talent.
Absolutely. And I keep hearing stuff like, oh, if you love this 2024 class, wait till you see the 2025. You and me are very much alike. We have a lot of the same traits and DNA. I just can't look that far ahead. I'm like, let's get through the season. Let's win some games on the field. Then we'll worry about 2025. But it's a different day and age in college football now. People are telling and projecting that the 2025 class could be top 4, top 3. Well, that's great, but there's still a lot that has to be done. There's another, the transfer portal closes, I believe, at the end of today or tomorrow. Auburn's got to has some needs they got to fill along the defensive line. I don't know about you, but I'm still wanting maybe another portal receiver. I get the dynamics of guys like Coleman and Thompson and perhaps a Ryan Williams if he flips, and Bryce Kane, who, by the way, is probably the sleeper in that class. He's electric. But do you really feel comfortable and just expect freshmen to come in? Sure they can. I mean, Alabama's had receivers and Georgia's had receivers that can do that. I just don't think you want to count on that. If they do, it's a nice bonus. I'd like to see Auburn get another receiver, another tackle maybe, and definitely help along the defensive front, maybe a safety too. And then the next couple days, the next 48 hours, for anyone that's listening and watching your show that's an Auburn fan, I think it's about to get real in the next 48 hours. There's a lot from staff changes to portals to visits, things like that I think is going to be, it's a whirlwind in the next 48 hours.
Today's show is also being brought to you by Marty McDonald State Farm Insurance. They're located at 925 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in Americus. You can reach them at 229-928-3686. Drop by and see Marty, Mary Lynn, or any of their staff and let them discuss your insurance needs. They can even do the famous discount double check to make sure you're receiving all of the savings that are available to you. Thanks to Marty McDonald State Farm Insurance for sponsoring this segment of the Integrity Sports Podcast. And like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Daryl, let's turn now to Auburn men's basketball. And Coach Bruce Pearl and his squad off to a great start, 11-2 now after the win over Penn a couple of nights ago. I know that you and Zach Blackerby do a reaction show after each Auburn game. How good is Bruce Pearl's squad, and how do you expect them to look once we get deep into SEC play?
They're a fun team to watch. I've been following Auburn basketball for a very long time, and even through the lean years of the Tony Barbie years and some of Bruce Pearl's early teams. And I know he's had some teams that have won conference titles that got to the Final Four. This team is one of those teams where it's like must-see TV. You really, really want to watch them because of the entertainment value. First of all, they seem to be very close and tight-knit. They celebrate little things. And to me, that matters. A loose ball on the floor, a block to tie up. They get crazy about that. They're also
Daryl, let me interrupt you here and say I watched your reaction show last night, and Janai Broom, and I don't remember the other guy, went after a loose ball on the floor, got up and chest bumped.
That's it. That's exactly. I mean, you normally see that when you hit a game-winning shot, you dunk on somebody. Going after a loose ball and that effort and enthusiasm, I think this is a very unselfish basketball team, not only because of what we just said, but they go 10 deep. It's as deep as a team that I've seen Bruce Pearl have. You've got guys, Tim, coming off the bench that could start at a lot of other programs in the SEC, but yet they've bought into their role. They've not only just, accept it, they embrace it. And I think that's where Auburn, Dylan Cardwell coming off the bench, Katie Johnson, Chad Baker-Mazzara, who had 16 against Penn the other night. They don't sulk. They don't pout. Bruce Pearl has been a master puppeteer, though, on when he puts that second five in certain points of the game. They call it the second wave. And you go back and look at scoring runs in games like Indiana and Virginia Tech and some of these other games where Auburn just completely goes on a 20-4 run and takes somebody's soul. That second five's in a lot. And so they embrace that and go, okay, it's time to change the complexity of this basketball game. I don't know how many teams in the SEC have that. Because as you know, and Bruce Pearl used to do this, you can play 10 or 11 guys in the non-conference schedule, and then most coaches shorten their bench when conference play starts and go to 8. Well, if you do that against Auburn, you are really, really playing with fire, because you're either going to have 8 guys that are going to be fatigued, or you're going to say, I got to give my guys a blow. I'm going to throw my second five out there and hope your second five is as deep as talented as Auburn's, or there's going to be a scoring differential. I think that's why they're set up. There's a lot of teams in the conference that I think their top 5, top 6 are as good or better than Auburn, but not many can go 10 deep. And I think that's going to be a difference maker.
And you think about, Daryl, when you and I were coming up and we were just watching SEC basketball, Kentucky dominated the SEC pretty much every year. you had some runs in there when Dale Brown was at LSU, and he had Shaq and those guys, and they did pretty good. Later on, you had Billy Donovan over at the University of Florida, and they had a few good runs. But the SEC is no longer dominated by that one team or those two teams. It's really, really strong this year and has become a formidable basketball conference. You look at Ole Miss right now, they're 13 or 14-0, doing really well in the non-conference. South Carolina's at 12-1. Mississippi State, Kentucky, Auburn, all those guys only have 2 losses now. It looks like it's going to be a grind in January and February.
Yeah, you make a great point. Even when it wasn't Kentucky, there was still only one team that seemed to dominate the SEC. You know, Nolan Richardson's Arkansas Razorbacks. You mentioned Billy Donovan wins back-to-back national championships. Dale Brown with Shaq and Chris Jackson. But I look at things like Ole Miss and South Carolina and Mississippi State as a little bit of fool's gold because I don't really know who they've played. You know, they haven't played the schedule that Alabama, Tennessee, or Auburn even has played. It'll get real for them when they start playing. I mean, even Arkansas, who has struggled some this year, has played a pretty tough schedule. It's going to get real for Ole Miss and those schools when they have to play the SEC schedule. And I think we'll find out a lot more about them. I'm really high on Tennessee. I think Rick Barnes is a good coach. I know he has postseason failure, but I think in the regular season, Tennessee is pretty tough. And Saturday, going to Fayetteville is going to be a huge first game test for Auburn. And, you know, you're talking about a program that opens their season on a neutral floor against Baylor and that opens their conference season in Bud Walton. Tough. So that's why no one needs to panic, stay the course. This team is built for the long haul.
We're talking with Daryl Dait, Montgomery radio vet. One Digital Solution is a steward of business growth and personal development. Their insurance, financial, and HR platforms provide you with a personalized, tech-enabled solution for a contemporary work-life experience. One Digital resolves real problems for your business and your employees by fusing together things like employee benefits, HR, and financial services. It's really everything all in one. It's One Digital. Contact our friend Will Peterson at 229-347-6289. One Digital is proud to sponsor the Integrity Sports Podcast. Daryl, you're getting to work around some really good people right now in the sports media industry. I know you cut your teeth with a good friend of both of ours, Doug Amos, there in Montgomery on the different shows that he's done. Now you're getting to work with people like Ben Taylor with the Auburn Opelika This Morning talk show, Jacob Goins with the On the Line show, and of course, Zach Blackerby, who's become a really good confidant of mine and has helped me with this show. That's got to be a lot of fun. And I also saw where you got to attend the SEC Media Days this year. Talk a little bit about all those folks you get to work around.
Sure. I'm indebted to, first of all, to Doug Amos for not only, you know, bringing me on ESPN, the ticket when I hosted the co-hosted the talk show with him, but I did Faulkner basketball play-by-play for years with him. Barry McKnight, the voice of the Troy Trojans, let me do Troy baseball and basketball. Travis Jerome, I did Alabama State football. But I have been blessed with the amount of and that's the thing when anyone talks about getting in broadcasting, when I look back with so much gratitude and thankfulness for this opportunity at 55 years old to be able to do this, because I've been able to experience all aspects in a way of broadcasting. I've done play-by-play, I've done color, I've done all the sports, I've done a sports talk show, I've done PA, and now I've got an opportunity to be on podcasts. So all those guys that you mentioned, I'm indebted to for helping me. Guys like Andy Burcham and Brad Law, too, of the Auburn Network, have been mentors to me and been very kind when I interact with them in the different press boxes. But SEC Media Days is where I pinch myself, because when I'm there interviewing a Laura Rutledge or a Brad Nessler and a Paul Feinbaum, and you're interacting with all the people that you've grown up watching on ESPN, and you have the opportunity to have a relationship with these folks, and they don't big time you. They're very kind. They're very nice. And then you get to go to press conferences and ask Nick Saban and Brian Kelly questions and interact with it. It's a really, really it's just I don't take it for granted. That's the thing. As long as I've done this, and it's been over 25 years, I am very, very grateful and indebted, and don't take for granted when people come up to me and say, hey, I watch Locked on Auburn, or send me a private message. I still can't wrap my head around that people want to tune in and hear what I have to say, or I'm at SEC Media Day rubbing elbows with these people. And when you mentioned Zach, has become a good friend, very, very just encouraging. One of those dudes that when you're around him, you can't help but feel good about yourself. He's an uplifter. And with him being the channel manager for all the Locked On College channels, I mean, he's their boss. He takes time and promotes and uplifts, and is a very, very, he brings out the best in people, as the best way to say it. So I'm proud to call him a friend, and have really enjoyed being alongside of him and watching this venture just for him, who he deserves it, just take off.
Yeah, I know when we started this show, I reached out to you and you said, hey, Tim, you need to call Zach Blackerby. And from the very first time I talked to him, he gave me all the answers I needed. Anytime, he gave me his cell phone number and said, hey, anytime you've got questions, call me or text me. And I've done that several times, and he's never blown me off, Daryl. He's always been that guy that's helped me get the answer to my question.
He just is, I don't know, he makes you feel, he's one of those people that you feel better when you're around him. It's just, he's got that gift, and it's special. And, he's younger than me, and I always joke around and call him my son and all that kind of stuff. But he is very, very well mature, what he's accomplished. And I just think the future is extremely bright for him and his venture. So I'm very, it's a perfect fit for me. It's in my sweet spot. I love Auburn. I love talking about Auburn sports. I love going on a variety of these talk shows and promoting Auburn and promoting Locked on Auburn. And so, but it's not a grind where it's something, I have a full-time job. And so I really can do it in a schedule that's suitable and comfortable for me. But I am forever grateful for all those people you mentioned. And I understand their significance and importance in my life.
Hey, Daryl, you and I for a long time have been baseball guys at heart. And you look at Auburn baseball, we've already talked Auburn football and basketball. We're getting ready to start baseball season at Auburn. And a guy that was a close friend for a long time, Butch Thompson, has been the head coach at Auburn now for many years. You and I knew Butch when he was in Montgomery. I actually met him when I was playing at Faulkner, and he was playing for Coach Brian Shoup over at Birmingham Southern. He then came and coached for a year at Huntington College while I was there at Patterson Field, so I got to know him there. It's been really neat to watch what he's done at Auburn, and boy, he's built them into a yearly contender.
I think that cohesiveness matters in any athletic department. I think the ones that fall apart have different people with different agendas pulling in different directions. And I really believe after Brian Harsin left, when Hugh Freeze came in, Butch Thompson and Bruce Pearl were the ambassadors in the face of Auburn Athletics for a long time. And Butch Thompson, as you know, is one of the most approachable, down-to-earth, full of faith people, and has done a great job at Auburn. I mean, I think about what they're bringing back next year. And with Joseph Gonzalez coming back, and Cooper McMurray, and Bobby Pierce, and Chris Stanfield, then they go out and get 4 really good guys in the portal, a couple pitchers, a couple outfielders, a shortstop to replace Foster. He just gets it done from a recruiting standpoint. But he is definitely, and Ike Irish. I mean, there's some dudes that you look at the renovations that are going on. If you've seen any of the drawings or the renderings of Hitchcock Field, and it's going to be freaking big time. Butch Thompson is the kind of guy that I've heard parents of players tell me directly, that's the kind of dude that I want my son to play for. And so he's always going to have good recruiting classes. He's always going to get people in the portal and be able to do that because of, his relationship with players and parents. Great dude, great coach, taking 2 teams to the college, 2 different Auburn teams to the College World Series. But I'm going to tell you what, just like Neville Arena was one of those places that people said it's a must go to, Auburn's new baseball field, a new baseball stadium, when it's done with all the expansions and renovations, is going to be really special. And nobody deserves that more than Butch Thompson.
And they sell out all the time. I don't know how I'll get in there, Daryl, but you and I need to make it a point to get to a game together this coming spring
Sure.
and watch
Yes.
Butch and Auburn baseball.
We'll do it.
Hey, Daryl,
Yeah.
one of the things that people seem to really like about this show is a final question. So we're getting close to wrapping up here. Every week I try to ask my guest about their family and their friends, the folks that really lift them up behind the scenes. And I look at a guy like you, and I know your situation. You've got a very successful company there that's got to be a grind at times. You've got a pretty hectic part-time gig now with all your different ventures, but you got to have folks behind the scenes that really support you and lift you up. Tell me about those folks that are under the wings of Daryl Dait that keep you lifted up and encouraged.
Well, it starts and ends with my family. And it starts with my wife, Julie, who throughout the course of any endeavor that I've taken on from way back in 1992, we were dating, and you asked me to go to Patterson Field and Crampton Bowl and take away some times that I could be spending with her to call these games, or when we had newborn twins and I was on the road at Faulkner and she was taking care of stuff. She has always been extremely supportive to allow me to chase my dreams. And it has never said, I would prefer you be at home. And not only that, she seems to be proud of that and is excited about that and pumps me up. I think the other thing, Tim, is as I get older, and you understand this too, one of the things in my life that I really, really treasure besides my faith is my family and what my family's perception is of me. So when my daughter or my son comes up to me and says, Dad, so-and-so at church or so-and-so at the game or in college told me that they love Locked on Auburn and they didn't realize that I was your daughter or whatever. And I see kind of that sense of pride in my children. It's not an egotistical thing. It's as a dad, my kids are proud of me.
Right.
And that's at the end of the day, no matter what my title has been, president, coach, broadcaster, dad and husband is the most important. And I think knowing that my children and my wife appreciate and are proud of what I do, it makes them proud. Man, that's what keeps me going. And that's what really, really drives me and makes me feel best about all this. That's it in a nutshell.
Well, we certainly want to thank Daryl Dait for being our guest today. I've always enjoyed catching up with you. We usually speak 4 or 5 times a year, either via phone or when I'm in Montgomery visiting the in-laws. Daryl, you're on social media a lot. You're on different shows. Tell people how they can catch you.
Sure. You can catch me on X. It's DAP6410. I love interacting on Twitter. And then on Friday mornings, it drops Locked on Auburn, where you get your podcast, and on YouTube, Spotify, Apple with Zach Blackerby. And then after every basketball game, home or away, as soon as it hits 000, we go live. And then Monday mornings on the Auburn Network and Tuesday afternoons at 3:15 on the Auburn Network on those shows you mentioned earlier. You just find them by going to the Auburn Network website. So it's a lot of fun. And, man, I can't thank you enough. What a blessing this has been to come on with you and all these years, man, and we get a chance to do this together. So I'm really excited.
I know it really has been a lot of fun, Daryl. And we want to thank you for watching the Integrity Sports Podcast today. Again, please go to our YouTube page and hit the subscribe button. We're really trying to build our YouTube presence, and share this video on Facebook or any of the social media platforms that you're watching on. We look forward to seeing you again next week. We air every Thursday at 7:15. For my good friend, Daryl Dait, I'm Tim Estes. Thanks for watching.